Alright, so this is Mission 3, post-Meridian, the culmination of our gradual transition from kind of bog-standard convoy escort to frontline combat. And right here you can see our fiction viewer. I don't want to talk too much about this fiction piece, except to say that everything in it does mean something very important, and if you were really, really clever, you might be able to figure out a lot of the plot from here. But this is supposed to be a flashback to Laporte's childhood, just demonstrating that she's a little bit unstable. So for the command briefing, I'm going to hand it over to Darius to talk about where this mission came from and what it's about.
Okay, basically this mission was it's part of the escalation of the war by the GTVA, and part of doing that is by showing the UEF that they mean business, and by business they mean bombing civilian targets. And yep, and basically trying to force them into an early surrender, like the terror bombings over Germany and UK and elsewhere in World War II, something like that. This is Admiral Byrne, basically giving props to the Jovian Rim Fleet and the Third Fleet. You know, just standard political stuff for press conferences and that. He knows that the admirals are pissed at him, but he's doing what he believes is right. And yeah, and it's just basically giving an acknowledgement to how the Jovian Republics just suffered throughout the first 18 months of the war, just bearing the brunt of the GTVA attacks. Now, as for this mission, I don't think this was in the alpha. I can't really remember that far back. But yeah, this is basically written into the mission outline as the first major combat for Laporte and Qasim. And yeah, and the psychological toll that they're going to get from it is going to be reflected later on, Qasim especially, but so we can talk about that at a later date. Alright, now we're on to the mission briefing. And Battuta can talk to us about the main antagonist in this mission, Severanti.
Right, well, Severanti is a sort of a tragic figure. He's been running the war for the first 18 months, and he's had some success. And the idea is Severanti was instructed specifically by the Terran elements of the GTVA. We want a clean war. We want you to knock out their military without angering their civilians or damaging their infrastructure. But we also want it over fast. And it was an impossible request. He did everything he could. He tried to run this inexorable, unstoppable, slow war of attrition where he would wear them down without a lot of damage to civilian targets. And now, in about a week, Steele has come in and made more progress than he has in the entire war. So he's looking to step up his game and demonstrate that he's still worthy of commanding the theater, so he takes a risk, and it doesn't really pay off. Severanti has a very extensive dossier, thanks to Dilma, in the tech room, which you can read. We tried to give all our characters depth. He's not a bad commander, but he does slip up here. So I think, I just wanted to mention earlier, with respect to the terror bombings, it's part of this greater theme we wanted to play up, that the Federation psychologically is not prepared for war in the way the Alliance is, which is why the Alliance thinks they're not ready to handle the universe full of Shivans. I want to hand it over to the E just to talk about something of our weapon balance, and hopefully we'll get him on more.
Okay, weapon balance. The main fighting gun we introduced in our first two missions, the Vulcan, that's it's on the lowest, it's the worst gun ever in my opinion. It doesn't offer anything of value to recommend it above the Maul, which you got in the second mission, I think. The secondaries we have, basically the Javelin is a harpoon equivalent. The Hellfire is pretty much like a Tempest. The Dirk fills the same role as the Tornado or that other swarm missile. Yeah, we don't have that many weapons as you could see in Free Space Retail, just because we don't have that much time write to make missions where you can introduce weapons and introduce the player to the weapons. And I just run out of things to say. Battuta?
I hope at some point we get a chance to be a little more creative with them, just because I think a lot of the Release 1 weapons ended up being sort of tweaked versions of Free Space 2 weapons, and some of the stuff we have lined up for Release 2 is a lot more interesting. But I wish we had gotten away with some more stuff. I think a lot of other mods, like for example Spoon's Wings of Dawn, have really, really creative weapon design, which I really admire. So here we are, closing in on the Meridian, and one of the big things we wanted to happen in this mission was learning to trust your wingmen, even when you can't command them. And players usually only see wingmen failures. They rarely notice wingmen successes, and if they do, they often complain about them because they render the mission self-playing. But here, we wanted to show that your wingmen are pretty smart, and they can get the job done pretty well. They do tend to wander a little close to the cruisers, but this area strike that comes in for your gunship, it's very rare for it to get close because your wingmen can do a pretty good job of executing. So we were very concerned about this mission balance-wise, because there are these 2 cruisers, a corvette with tag, and the Meridian itself, all of which can really screw you up if you get too close. There's this very narrow avenue down the middle, which is safe for the player, and if you wander too close to one of those warships, you're in big trouble because of the Fury AI. Speaking of which, Fury AI actually, when used with the standard flak most Free Space 2 ships carry, causes it to fire 10 rounds a second and makes it basically this unstoppable hose of death. So we switched a lot of the standard flak out for heavy flak, which is longer range and does more damage, but actually fires slower. So yeah, you can see right here Quantum Delta's attacking some of these Myrmidons. These are the dumbest Myrmidons in the entire campaign. But we didn't want live combat to be too overwhelming this first time in a major battle. So yeah, we hope the AI for the wingmen paid off, especially in later missions you really have to count on it, and we wanted the player to know that they're not really useless. So I'm going to hand it over to Darius to talk about the Karuna frigates and the tactics involved, because there are a lot of our missions that have a pair of Karunas as sort of a base for the player.
Alright, so it looks like, oh no, he hasn't wiped out all the fighters yet, but basically, yeah, this mission will tell the player to go back to the frigates and once those beam cannons are taken out, and draw back and draw the fighters towards them, because those frigates are basically slaughterhouses for any fighter that gets in range of its guns. It reflects the different combat tactics that UEF pilots have of the GTVA. GTVA pilots have been fighting Shevans, and as you know, Shevans have their strength in warships, so you don't want to send another warship. Yeah, GTVA doesn't want to send another warship to combat a Shevan warship, because chances are it's not going to come out the other end. So fighters and bombers are used to travelling by themselves, away from their ships, and UEF pilots, on the other hand, learn to stay very close to their home ships for the point defenses, point defense bonuses that they give, and they learn to attack enemy capships in tandem. You don't get to see much of that in this mission because frigates seem to do pretty well by themselves, but against any of the newer generation ships with the forward beams, it's pretty much a must to get those out of the way. And yep.
You're good to go.
Alright, so I just want to say a word about how much work Fury did. First, getting the Karuna tabled up to what it is. He did an amazing job with weapon balancing. And while I wouldn't say he's incredibly patient, he's actually sort of a saint. Also, I want to point out, he did those railgun muzzle flashes, which are just amazing. Here you can see Quantum Delta strafing an Aeolus. The Aeolus is the smallest ship we allow out on its own. We really don't like cruisers, we feel they're too fragile. And since they still have hundreds of people aboard, we just don't like how they go out there and get blown up. It feels like there's no point building a cruiser if a single fighter can take it out. But the Aeolus is useful as sort of a flak gunboat, which I think is what the GTVA uses it for. It probably has dozens of these things, probably intended for just defending destroyers against Shivan bombers. And Darius was mentioning the tandem tactics of the Karuna. We almost always deploy them in pairs. If you play the capship command mission, I think you can see why. It makes them so much more effective, because on their own they don't have the damage output to really contend with Alliance ships. However, they do have some problems. I want the E. Do you want to talk a bit about the technical aspects of the Karuna and everything that's wrong with it?
Okay. The Karuna, from a technical standpoint, is pretty horrible. The model itself isn't optimized at all. It's basically built for cutscene rendering and that stuff, not for in-game usage. It causes considerable slowdowns, even on machines that are usually rather powerful. And I cannot wait to see them to play this again with better models for these ships, because I love the Karuna just the way it looks and just the way it sounds and all about it. The only thing I don't love is the fact that I can't build them on my PC without my frame rate dropping to somewhere below 10 FPS.
Rearming complete, sir. You're good to go.
And I guess that's all there is to say about them. Battuta?
Yes, if anybody's listening and you can do LODs, remapping, anything like that, we could really use some help getting all our models into shape. We don't usually work with assets. We're trying to optimize. We have a number of modelers who've shown interest, but really, it would really help us out for the inevitable director's cut, or for release 2. So, here I actually want to talk about, we're on this ending conversation where Laporte interacts with Sims for the first time meaningfully. And Sims was a character who's been in since the alpha, even back when Laporte was a man. So I think I've mentioned before in these commentaries one of our dark secrets, which is that War in Heaven is intended to be this sort of dark mirror image of Age of Aquarius. We wanted to invert Age of Aquarius, its plot structure, its mood, sort of the journey the character undergoes. And we thought formally, for that reason, it would be best to make Laporte a woman. We thought it would make the character more interesting. It hadn't been done much before, and it really distinguished her from Sam. Plus, it creates this interesting conflict in terms of our gender stereotypes, between the notion that women are sort of gentle, which fits in with how Laporte thinks she is, and then this underlying cold-blooded streak she has going. But when Laporte became a woman, Sims did not become a man. And I don't know if you'd specifically say there's a romance here, but there's a lot of tension. Darius, do you want to actually talk about some of the characters here, Sims, Laporte, and if you want to say anything about Bree and Kasim, who aren't ultimately as important, but still are?
Alright, so, yeah, Sims and Laporte is the probably the primary relationship that's going through this campaign, or at least this half of the campaign. And yeah, it's one that's based on sort of like mutual respect. Laporte's mouthing off Sims, and Sims doing the same in a very Martian style. And yeah, it just gradually gets built upon, has its ups and its downs, and yeah, forms the basis of much of Laporte's development, character development, in much the same way that Bree and Kasim did in the first two missions. Well, in the first few missions anyway. And Bree and Kasim actually decrease in importance as the campaign goes on, and she finds herself being removed from people who she once identified with and who she once looked up to. And I think back in the alpha there was actually a concerted attempt to actually contrast where Laporte is now, later on in the campaign, and where Bree was when she left him. Bree basically stays the same, and Laporte realizes that there's just so much distance between them now. She's a different person, and in a way their relationships, Bree and Laporte's relationship sort of gone, really. And as you'll see in later missions, Kasim has his own fate as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give a shout out to our forum member Sarah for posting so much good analysis on the characters that really encouraged us. We're coming up at the end here, but we have a lot more to say on the next mission, so we see you guys there.